Good morning, everyone. It's time for today's devotional. And I must warn you, it's a little rough to hear, but it is also important. The title is God's Discipline is Impartial. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 7 says, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? Says, I want you to imagine that you and I go to the roof of a tall building. You are an obedient Christian. I am a disobedient Christian. We both jump off the top of that building. What is going to happen to us? The answer is obvious. We both die. It does not matter that you are obedient and I am disobedient. The law of gravity applies to both of us. The same thing is true of God's discipline. You may have lived your life as an obedient Christian for years before you went away from God, but none of us is exempt from God's discipline. As Hebrews chapter 12, verses 6 through 7 says, those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? God's reproofs are impartial. They apply to every Christian, all those who have been received as God's children. Yet there are plenty of Christians today who live as if they are exempt from the discipline described in Hebrews chapter 12. They think God will allow them to get away with things that other people cannot get away with. Have you ever felt that way? Perhaps because some dramatic conversion experience you had 30 years ago, or because your grandpa was a preacher, or because you're a Sunday school teacher, or because you have been plenty good at obeying God in the past. For whatever reason you think that God will not send his discipline into your life, and that he will not allow hardship into your life in order to correct you. That is what the Corinthian Christians believed. They thought that because they were part of such a great church, they could live however they wanted to. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul warned them, I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that our fathers, the Israelites, were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all ate the spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not well pleased, for they laid low in the wilderness. Do you remember what happened to the Israelites on the way to the promised land because they were disobedient to God? God sentenced them to 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, and they died in the wilderness without ever experiencing the promised land. In fact, if you could have flown over the desert back then, you would have seen the desert littered with the bodies of God's own people, the Israelites, who were disciplined by God. Paul was saying, not even God's chosen people were exempt from God's discipline, and neither are you. You and I are not exempt either. God's discipline is impartial. Nobody is exempt from it. That's a little hard to hear. But God disciplines us in order to get us back on the straight and narrow path that leads to righteousness. As I've said in my earlier videos, I've tasted the discipline of God myself. But you should look at it as, if you're being disciplined, God loves you. Just like our earthly parents, they love us and they should punish us when we do wrong. The Bible is essential in our daily living. A friend once told me the Bible is basic instruction before leaving earth. And I truly believe that. And I read it every day. And I hope and pray that y'all out there will do the same. Because it's our roadmap. The Bible is our roadmap to living a life pleasing to our Father in heaven. I hope you got something out of today's devotional. And I will be praying for all of you out there. And one thing, I may not be on tomorrow. It's Monday, and I usually have a very busy day on Mondays. I have 2 doctor's appointments, and my friend, she's only off on Mondays, so that's when I have to get everything in for one day. But if I'm able to, I will make a video. If not, the Lord's willing, I will see you again on Tuesday for daily devotion. May God bless you and keep you all. It's my prayer. Amen.